If it seems to you that Antarctica is just a white desert and penguins against the background of ice, you are seriously underestimating this continent. Under the thickness of ice, ghost ships, rivers that flow inside the Earth, lakes without sunlight, and traces of life that are millions of years older than human civilization. And the strangest thing is that Antarctica does not just keep secrets. It sometimes seems as if it specifically leaves us clues. It sings with a low hum, then releases blood-colored water to the surface, then suddenly opens a hole in the icy ocean the size of an entire country. Today on Top Facts, 15 of the most mysterious finds of Antarctica. Endurance, the ship that did not want to disappear. The story of Endurance is not a novel and not a movie legend, but one of the toughest survival exams in history. At the beginning of the 20th century, Ernest Shackleton led an expedition across Antarctica. The ship was called Endurance, stamina. The irony of fate was that the most stamina was needed not by wood and sails, but by people. The ice closed in as if the ocean had decided to shut the door. The vessel was trapped, slowly breaking the hull until it went underwater. And then, reality without special effects. A camp right on the ice, drift, hunger, cold, and small boats that look ridiculous next to the Antarctic Ocean. Until you realize that this is the only chance. Shackleton went for help and, what is more important, did not abandon a single person. Everyone survived. And then, more than a century passed. It would seem that only splinters should remain of a wooden ship. But in March of 2022, researchers found Endurance on the bottom of the Weddell Sea, almost vertically, neatly set into the darkness. On the stern, the name was still readable. Depth, about 3 kilometers. And the ship, amazingly intact. Why? The water there is so cold that those creatures that usually eat wood simply do not live there. As a result, the ship turned into a museum that cannot be touched. They study it, film it, measure it, and leave it alone, so that history does not crumble from human curiosity. And this is only the beginning. Because the Weddell Sea knows how to surprise not only with sunken legends. Ancient DNA from the bottom. A letter aged up to 1 million years. Imagine that you take a handful of dirt from the ocean floor and find traces of life in it that are up to 1 million years old. That is exactly what happened. Scientists extracted sediment samples deep under the Antarctic seafloor and found fragments of ancient DNA in them. These pieces of genetic code are not someone's bones and not skeletons, but microscopic traces of organisms that once lived in the water, died, and their remains slowly went into the silt. Under normal conditions, such traces break down. But here, cold, darkness, little oxygen, and decay goes many times more slowly. Scientists call this sedimentary ancient DNA. Essentially, it is the archive of the ocean, which is not printed on paper, but is preserved in molecules. And it is important not for the sake of a wow effect. From such fragments, you can understand which species lived here before, how food chains changed, and how the ocean reacted to the cooling of Earth and the growth of glaciers. That is, we get not fairy tales, but a real chronicle of how the planet switched between states. And this is a very unpleasant hint. The ocean knows how to change faster than it seems. And now, to a phenomenon that looks like a glitch in the Matrix. A giant hole in the ice, a polynia the size of Ireland. In 2017, something appeared in Antarctica that is hard to accept the first time. A huge area of open water right inside sea ice. Its area was compared to Ireland, roughly tens of thousands of square kilometers. Scientists call such a phenomenon a polynia, a place where the ice does not hold, although around it there is an icy armor. The strangest question, how so? It is freezing there. Everything should set. The answer is not from above, but from below. Under the ice, warmer and saltier waters can rise. Currents push heat upward. The ice melts from below. The surface does not have time to freeze, and the cycle repeats like a pump. Why do polynias arise exactly where they arise? There is still no exact answer. Some scientists talk about wind and pressure drops. Others about changes in currents. There are versions that such places can be used by animals, for example, whales or seals, and sometimes this helps to keep the polynia open. But the main thing is something else. Such a hole shows that the ocean under the ice is not asleep. It moves, it breathes, it pronotes heat. And where there is heat, there is risk for the ice. And doubtless it will be even stranger. The ice does not just melt, it sings. Singing ice, a melody that a human does not hear. There's a place in Antarctica that looks like an ordinary ice shield. But scientists discovered a huge ice shelf can emit a constant low hum. Not music in the usual sense. The frequencies are too low for our ears. This is a song of an underground scale that seismic sensors catch. How does this happen? Imagine a strong wind that drives snow dunes across the surface. Snow and ice begin to vibrate slightly, micro-trembling, almost zero. But on the scale of a gigantic glacier, it turns into a steady tone, as if this entire ice slab became a string. And most importantly, this song changes. When the surface melts, when a storm rearranges the snow, when weak zones appear, the tone, rhythm, the nature of the oscillations shift. That is, the ice literally gives a signal about its condition. If it sings differently, it means something is happening to it. And it is frighteningly beautiful. The planet seems to leave us an audio podcast about its own health. Only you need to listen with instruments. And now, to creatures that live as if they graduated from a survival school on another planet. Microbes that eat air. In Antarctica, there are soils where there is almost no organic matter, little sun, cold, and it seems nothing can live. But scientists found microbes that obtain energy literally from the air, from tiny concentrations of hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. This is not a metaphor. They have enzymes capable of squeezing energy from trace gases with very high efficiency. It turns out that entire micro-communities can exist where there is no normal food and almost no light. Why is this important? Because it expands the boundaries of where life is possible. If on Earth organisms can live on air, then on other planets and moons, where there are no forests, but there is an atmosphere or chemical processes, there can also be unexpected forms of life. Antarctica, in this sense, is like a test site for space. It is hard to presume it harsher conditions, but life still crawls into cracks. And now, imagine entire mountains that exist, but you will never see them. The Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, a ghost ridge under the heart of East Antarctica, a huge mountain massif is hidden. The Gamburtsev subglacial mountains. In length, it is comparable to large ridges on the world map, and the heights there are up to several kilometers. But above it lies a thickness of ice of 2 to 4 kilometers. They were seen, not with eyes, but with instruments. Seismics, gravimetry, radar from aircraft. And here, the puzzle begins. These mountains are very ancient. Usually over such times, winds, water, temperature changes should erase sharp peaks, turning them into manky hills. But here the relief looks quite young and sharp. One of the main versions, the giant ice sheet worked like a lid, protecting the mountains from ordinary erosion. Another, that it is so cold below and everything is so frozen that razrushenia goes extremely slowly. It turns out that Antarctica is a safe, and in this safe lie mountains that do not age by our rules. But there is a place even more cinematic. There, the ice looks as if it was wounded. Blood falls. a red wound on a glacier. In one of the dry valleys of Antarctica, a stream the color of blood flows out of a glacier. It is called blood falls, blood waterfall. In real life, it looks as if someone spilled a huge volume of red liquid on white ice. But this is not paint and not algae. The color appears because of iron. Under the glacier, a salty brine is hidden, rich in dissolved iron. When this water comes out and meets the air, the iron oxidizes, rusts, and colors the stream red. The most eerie thing, this brine can remain liquid at sub-zero temperatures because of very high salinity. And inside, it live microbes that get energy without oxygen and without sun, due to chemical reactions with iron and sulfur. That is, below, there is a closed system, ancient, dark, and alive. A small laboratory that proves life can exist where, in theory, everything died. Next, a glacier whose nickname sounds like a warning. The Doomsday Glacier, Thwaites. The Thwaites Glacier is often called the Doomsday Glacier. And this is not because scientists love drama, but because it holds gigantic volumes of ice that can affect sea level all over the world. Thwaites in West Antarctica is moving toward the ocean faster than many other glaciers. And the problem is that warm ocean water is increasingly getting under its shelf part, as if it is sawing the support from below. There is data that over recent decades, ice losses have accelerated. But the main thing is the grounding line, the place where the ice stops lying on rock and begins to float. If this line retreats, the glacier can accelerate even more strongly. Scientists argue about the speed of future changes, but they do not argue about the fact of the risk. If Thwaites loses stability, this can push neighboring ice masses toward a faster departure into the ocean. And then, a wave of consequences for coastal cities, ports, agricultural lands. Antarctica, in this point, is no longer exotica, but a question that concerns everyone. And after such a topic, you want to switch to something calm. But Antarctica does not work like that. The McMurdo Dry Valleys. A Martian landscape on Earth Antarctica is the largest desert on the planet. Yes, a desert. Precipitation. There is so low that by definition, it is a desert zone. And in this desert, there is a place where there is almost no ice. The McMurdo Dry Valleys. There, the wind sweeps away the snow, the soil is dry, the stones are bare, and the landscape looks like a frame from a film about Mars. That is why scientists love these valleys. They help to understand what conditions for life on other planets could look like, and what traces of life are worth looking for at all. There is one more unexpected moment. There, they observe the movement of huge sand dunes. They can crawl by 1 meter to 1.5 meters per year, which for such a cold place seems too fast. This is associated with changes in winds and temperatures, with local melting and the restructuring of the precipitation regime. That is, even the most dead places react to climate. And the valleys show changes are not somewhere in reports. They go right along the ground, centimeter by centimeter. And now, finds that literally fly in from the sky. Antarctic meteorites, letters from space. If a meteorite falls into a forest or into the ocean, finding it is almost impossible. But on the white Antarctic ice, a dark stone is visible like a dot on a clean sheet. Plus, cold and dryness perfectly preserve space rocks. There's also a Hitry mechanism. The movement of ice and the weathering of upper layers can bring meteorites to the surface and even collect them in certain zones. Therefore, Antarctica is one of the best places on Earth to search for such finds. Over decades, expeditions collected tens of thousands of samples. Among them, there are stones that were once part of asteroids, and even fragments whose origin is linked to Mars. For science, these are not just souvenirs. Meteorites are time capsules. They preserve information about what the solar system was built from, how planets formed, what processes went on in early epochs. And each such stone says, space is not somewhere far away. From time to time, it falls right under our feet. We just usually do not notice it. Next will be a place where far and hot meet at one point. Mount Erebus. Fire in the middle of ice. Against the background of Antarctic cold, the thought of an active volcano sounds like an error. But it exists. Erebus on Ross Island is one of the most famous active volcanoes of the continent. And the most impressive thing is that for years, it has a lava lake boiling inside the crater. Getting there is difficult. Wind, frost, altitude, remoteness. But researchers who climbed to the zone of activity found what you do not expect from a volcano in Antarctica: life. In warm pockets of soil, in steam-warmed ice caves, microbes can exist that live not at the expense of the sun, but at the expense of heat and minerals. This is again the same motif. Antarctica seems uninhabitable, but in unexpected places, it hides living systems. And against this background appears a story that the internet adores. A story that sounds too beautiful to be true. A giant pyramid, truth, myth, and the power of one picture. When an image appears online that looks like a perfect pyramid under snow, people do not need a long warm-up. In 2009, a similar shot spread across the internet. As if in Antarctica, there is a structure with Ravnami faces and an almost symmetrical form. Versions immediately appeared: ancient civilization, secret bases, unknown builders. But science usually has one question for such stories. Where is the evidence inside the form? Walls, rooms, materials, traces of processing, regular geometric elements that cannot be explained by nature. The problem is that nature knows how to deceive the eye. Wind, ice, shadow, perspective, erosion. Sometimes mountains really look too correct. And geologists explain, sharp forms can be natural, especially when a glacier works. Rocks crack along lines of weakness, and snow polishes contours. So today the pyramid is more likely a story about how one image turns into a myth. But in this story there is a plus. It forces people to look at the map of Antarctica more attentively and learn to distinguish a beautiful legend from real facts. And the real facts, Dalsha, will be much deeper, literally on the bottom of the ocean. The South Sandwich Trench, an abyss where Earth bends. Not far from the South Sandwich Islands, the ocean sinks into one of the darkest structures of the planet, a deep-sea trench where one tectonic plate goes under another. This place is not about beautiful views. This place is about Earth's engine. Subduction is the process when a plate dives into the mantle. Earthquakes are born there, volcanic arcs form there, crust is recycled there. And all of this happens in darkness, under pressure, where a human will not survive without machines. But Imino, such places help to understand how the planet mixes rocks, how it builds new structures, how it distributes heat, and, what is especially interesting, even at such depths, life occurs. Organisms that do not need sunlight. They obtain energy from chemical reactions, as if they live by a different set of rules. And when you hear Antarctica, think not only about ice. Think about the fact that nearby there are oceanic zones where Earth literally changes shape. Next, a find that sounds like science fiction. A river hundreds of kilometers long. Nummer 1, a subglacial river, a hidden artery of Antarctica. Under the thickness of Antarctic ice, water flows. Not puddles and not small streams, but long connected systems of channels. Scientists have discovered subglacial water routes with lengths of hundreds of kilometers, which can feed large ice streams and eventually go into the sea. How was this found? Aircraft with radars that scan through the ice like an X-ray. This is how they map relief, voids, water channels. And it turns out that the ice does not lie dead. It interacts with water from below, and water affects the speed of its movement. Why is this important? Because where there is water underneath, the ice can slide faster, and if subglacial systems change due to temperature or pressure, this can accelerate the flow of ice into the ocean. In some estimates, if large masses of ice in these regions lose stability over the course of time, the contribution to sea level can be very noticeable. But even without numbers, the meaning is simple. Under the Antarctic lid, there is a hydro system that works, and it is directly connected with the future of coastlines all over the world. And now, a point that puts a seal on the whole story. Antarctica was not always icy. Once there, forests burned. Ancient fires. Antarctica that burned. The most powerful thing in Antarctica is the contrast. We see a white desert and think that it was always like that. But finds on some islands and in geological layers tell a different story. Tens of millions of years ago, there could have been forests there. And these forests burned. Researchers found signs of ancient fires, charred fragments of vegetation, layers of ash, traces of strong thermal impacts. There are versions that in those times volcanic activity and a warm climate created conditions under which fires repeated again and again. And here, Antarctica becomes not the edge of the world, but a mirror for the whole planet. Because it shows, Earth knows how to switch between states. Where today there is ice kilometers thick, once there could have been green zones and fire. This story is not needed for horror. It is needed for understanding. Climate, oceans, volcanoes, ecosystems. Everything is connected. And if we want to understand how the world will change tomorrow, sometimes we have to read the oldest pages hidden in stone and ice. Antarctica is not just a place. It is an archive that sometimes opens to us exactly enough for it to feel unsettling. Write in the comments everything you think about this, and subscribe to TopFacts for the most incredible collections of facts and videos from all over the internet. Thanks for watching, and right now, click on one of our previous episodes.